I'm Jason Sylvia, and this is the Creative Capital Show. A show about creative people and how those creative people turn into entrepreneurs by taking their creativity and turning it into a business and facing all the trials and tribulations along the way. Burnout. It happens to the best of us, whether it's our work, our personal life, or just simply going after the goals we're trying to achieve. We can sometimes lose ourselves in the process, much to our own detriment. Most people recover from burnout by spending time with family and friends, or taking a relaxing vacation. However, this episode's guest recovered from burnout by starting his own business. Kevin M. Rose Jr. is the owner of Unplugged Essentials, a company that curates experiences that stimulate the body and mind through its line of hemp-infused recovery soak and skincare products. In this episode, I sit down with Kevin and talk about the importance of self-care and recovery, mastering the art of the pivot, the difficulties of working within the CBD space, how to approach collaborations, and why he's not the typical business owner within the wellness space. And it all started with a trip to a flotation center. Enjoy. Hopefully gets picked up, but it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, did you get burned before? Like, what's happening?
People get weird when it comes to money, or like it's that like famine mentality, right? Like I have half a glass, so I can't give any to anybody else. So it's like any insight that they've learned along the way. Sometimes, not everybody, but like they'll kind of play that game of like, I don't know if I should give this information up because then that'll make me not be as successful, which is obviously
or like
backwards.
Ruin the image I crafted or something like that.
Yeah. And you got to come at it like it's obvious to me, but like just being honest and genuine makes the most sense, because then you don't have to worry about doing anything or trying to maintain an image, right? Like you just got to roll with it.
I think that may be the actual rolling start we're going to use for the show. We're just going to fade into that because that was perfect. But yeah, Mr. Kevin M. Rose
Jr.
Kevin M. Rose Jr.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me in the beginning on that. I'll make sure that when I post about it, it's Kevin M. Rose Jr. Welcome to the show. Thank you for having me in your production facility. And for those that are like, production facility for what? Kevin, what is it that you exactly do?
So my name is Kevin Rose Jr. I'm the founder of Unplugged Essentials. We offer simple self-care products in an effort to help our customers unplug, recover, and evolve. Basically speaking, we offer some bath soaks, skincare, and in the process of expanding our overall brand and impact.
Now, this brand and these products and this business you have, as far as, timeline perspective in relation to the rest of your life, is fairly recent, because before all this, so I want to get into this a little bit, everything that was leading up to this business. You had a background in music. You went to Berkeley.
Yep, Berkeley College of Music, saxophone player.
So you're a saxophone player and also trained others in Muay Thai or MMA?
Both
Muay Thai and MMA.
And a little bit of jiu-jitsu, but like that's all kind of in that MMA wheelhouse for the most part.
So you're doing those two things, and you ran a trucking business. Can you just explain how you balanced all those three of those and how they all just incorporate, like, I'm going to play the sax, and I'm going to be a Muay Thai fighter, I'm going to train other people in Muay Thai and MMA, and I'm going to run a trucking company?
Well, I still am a maniac, and I usually, when I intro myself, or like when people ask me what I do, I say I'm the Cape Verdean Forrest Gump. So like I kind of do a little bit of everything, right? And I'm a guy chasing my tail a little bit. But with music, that obviously was my first love and passion, and for me growing up, an outlet for me to express myself in a unique way. And as going through Berkeley, I ended up leaving Berkeley before I graduated to go and work with a family business, which was moving at the time, and then got me into the trucking aspect. So there's that kind of correlation.
So your family had a moving and trucking company?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. And then I came back. I came back to town and ended up, trying to help out some family. Not really sure of my personal direction. Then I got into trucking, drove for them for a couple of years, and then decided to open my own trucking company. And throughout that time, I was interested in my early 20s or so. This is going back to maybe 2005. Started boxing, kickboxing, and doing that, and that progressed up until to today, which I still do. All of that being said, I was burnt out a little bit and getting injured, and that's kind of what led me to the path of Unplugged.
So you had already started and ran your own business, the
trucking company. Yeah.
And was the MMA and the Muay Thai your own business because you were teaching others, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I was teaching out of a gym at that time, and I was still competing as well. So I was an amateur kickboxer. I was teaching 2 to 3 times a week, competing, running the trucking company, for the most part driving at that time, and being a 26, 27-year-old maniac and just going after it, man. I loved everything that I did and just went for it.
Can you walk through the experience of starting that original first business, that trucking business, because you had the experience from being in the family trucking business? So what made you go, hey, I'm going to start my own rather than taking over the family business?
My family's, it's both of my uncles, and they still have their own trucking companies as well. But it's extremely difficult at times to work with family. So I ended up,
I've talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah,
I can understand. I can
yeah.
definitely understand where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah. So with that, we decided to part ways, and, I had an opportunity to buy a truck, and that industry for the most part is fairly plug and play, as far as operationally and, how you get paid and kind of build that. So, went out, got a loan, and went to work.
So you were saying before, you're your own version of Forrest Gump, and you're in your mid-20s, and you just want to do all these different things. Was it more you wanting to do that, all these different things at once? Do you say that was more part of your personality? Was it more because you were younger now? Was it a mix of column A and column B?
I think it was a mix of things. I mean, at that time in my life, being fairly rambunctious, not really knowing what I wanted to do as far as directions, I was just kind of like tasting things and things that I enjoyed. I was all in. I've ever since I was young, I was a type A person. Like if 10 is good, I'm going to do 20, and luckily for me, it wasn't, necessarily a substance or anything necessarily negative. It was, things that I was passionate about, business, working out.
Now, how long were you juggling all these things before you got to a point of burnout, and what do you think led you to a point of burnout? Because there's times where people and I think we hear more about this now than ever when it comes to business people, The Rock gets up at 4:30 in the morning and hits it hard, and he's been doing this for years. Or Mark Wahlberg in his 50s is does his training at 4 and go that seems to be the norm now. You juggle all these things and you get up at 4 a.m. and you go to sleep this and you're ruthlessly efficient and blah, blah, blah. It's well, how do these people not get burned? So what do you think led you to the burnouts? Because, it was hey, I'm willing to try all these different things and that's it? Yeah.
So for me, working out and training and coaching and driving the truck for 40, 50 hours a week was not conducive to the overall physical health, considering the amount of output that I had going physically. And then on top of that, sitting down in a truck for, those 40, 50 hours. So with that, it was extremely difficult for me to be consistent without either physically burning out or mentally burning out, just because the kind of dissonance of the two things that I was doing. So for me, it wasn't even really a matter of efficiency. It was just the two aspects of my life, or the two most important things of my life, were so contradictory that we're kind of eating each other up in a way.
Did you, and by the way, if anybody's hearing stuff in the background, it's because we're in a warehouse area, which we're going to get into that in a minute. So that was not a clever truck sound effect. I wish I planned things out that much, but no. Did you realize at the time when you were doing all these different things and juggling things, is this more in hindsight, oh yeah, this was going to lead to burnout? Or at the time were you realizing hey, this can't sustain itself and there's going to be a change at some point? Or did you not see that happening?
Didn't see it at all. And where I started to make adjustments was, okay, I had a fight lined up. I mean, well, even before this, but I had to pull out of a couple of fights because of injuries. And it was like, okay, yes, I'm training hard. And, injuries might happen, but they were unnecessary injuries because I was tired. Or something would happen with the trucking company. Maybe I would, miss a bill or make a mistake there. And it just was a matter of looking at things and going like, okay, this isn't sustainable. And how can I find a way to run efficiently? So that's what started to kind of get me on the path of looking at either wellness or wellness modalities or things to be kind of like rejuvenative for me in order to sustain what I was doing.
So you were you were already starting to see little signs like trickling, nothing big, I would say, thankfully, yet, but you were like, all right, it's like a little thing here, a little thing there.
Yeah,
it was starting
like
to interrupt the flow of stuff, and it's like, okay, I got to start doing some research and going into, hey, I got to start doing some research to nip this in the bud now before something serious happens where it seriously affects the business I'm running and or, the training and the fighting.
Yeah, and it was just because I was so passionate about those two things, and it was like it needs to operate. One of my favorite quotes from my father, and it's something that has been with me to this day. And he's like, if it's hard, you're doing it wrong. And like some people can look at it in different ways, but how I took that was like, I need to be more efficient. I need to make it easy, right? Like, and how can I make it easy? I need to have systems in place and stuff that I've learned throughout business over the years. But like, it was extremely difficult, even though I loved doing what I was doing. So it just became a matter of how can I make it easier for myself.
So you were starting to research ways to recover and be more efficient about recovery, et cetera. What were some of the things that you were researching at the time?
I was looking into yoga. I'm personally a big cannabis guy, so like at the time it wasn't really as mainstream or like viewed as having therapeutic effects. But yoga, I started researching cryo and just the modalities that are kind of becoming more mainstream now. I started looking into that, and then luckily a friend of mine had told me about floating or flotation therapy, and that's kind of the beginning process for me.
Can you explain, because now we're going to start getting into the journey of the business, can you explain to the folks out there what flotation therapy is? Because I feel like sometimes the only frame of reference they have is either Joe Rogan or that one Simpsons episode.
Yeah. Stranger Things, I think.
Maybe Stranger Things, yeah.
There's a few like mainstream, it never really painted in an amazing light as far as like TV shows and stuff like that. But so flotation therapy, basically you're in a pool of water with roughly 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt that is heated to skin temperature, in which you restrict your external stimulation as far as whether it be lights or pretty much whatever you're comfortable with. But lights, you have earplugs in so you don't get water in your ears, and you just pretty much float naturally and take the pressure off your body. And interestingly enough, with that reduction of stimulation that you're getting from your various input or senses, it puts you in a theta state or brain state, which is similar to like right before you fall asleep, and really relaxing and introspective time.
And what is it about the salts in particular that help? Because is this the same as sensory deprivation therapy? Okay. And what is it about the salt that like, hey, it helps everything out?
So the salt one, it makes you more, it makes you buoyant essentially, the Epsom salt, and then it being magnesium sulfate is really good for muscle aches and pains, stuff like that. A lot of people are magnesium deficient, so helps loosen up any muscle tension, stuff like that.
And so you had to go to a facility to do this. It's not something that like, let me just get some Epsom salt and put it in a bathtub and like turn all the lights off and put some headphones on and like we're good.
No. So a friend of mine from the gym had told me about it. This was right after, I believe it was an IT ban issue, but at the time I didn't know. Had to pull out of a fight, and I'm like, I need to figure out, like I was trying to stretch. I tried to take a few yoga classes, felt like super weird. Being kind of like the only guy in the room, don't really know how to act. And at the time it was like kind of uncomfortable. So guy from my gym had told me about it and started doing some research, and there was a location in Boston, which they're still there in, I believe, Cambridge, and scheduled my first appointment and went to go check it out.
So now we're getting into the inspiration for which would become your business. Can you, and you do this on your site and, even in like the website for your business, which we're going to get into about how this was, like pretty much a life-changing experience. Can you walk through just going into that experience for the first time and what you felt and why it was just or I was going to say eye-opening with sensory deprivation. I guess that wouldn't make sense. But why was it an eye-opening experience, I guess, for you?
Yeah. So I went in super skeptical, thought I was going to be extremely underwhelmed. So went to the location. They were very friendly. It's the experience as far as walking in is very similar to like a massage or a spa. They greet you at the door. You walk in. They kind of give you an overview of what you're going to experience, how to operate the tank, and pretty much, go over everything that you're about to experience. So you go take a shower, and then you hop into the pool or the tank. Upon 5 to 10 minutes or so, just kind of innately, because you're not getting any input, whether, you're a little cold, warm, or looking at anything, the first thing that happened to me was I started to realize my breath. And it was just like, oh, like this is how I'm breathing, then my heartbeat, because there was nothing else, nothing else to distract me from that. And then from there, it was basically the easiest way I can kind of explain it was like a conversation with myself from a different perspective, like in the sense of not that I was talking to myself, but like that inner dialogue, like there was no distraction to be like, how do I feel? What's going on? Where's my mindset? Like, and it just immediately took me to a place of like in between meditation and like self-discovery, which I've personally never experienced. Like I was always like, I need to do more and I got to work, and just type A, go. And then having that opportunity, or putting myself in that position to have that opportunity transformed my perspective, in like, oh shit, like maybe working harder isn't necessarily the way I succeed. Right? Going back to kind of what my father said, right? Like if it's difficult, or if it's hard, you're doing it wrong. So maybe taking some rest or taking some educated relaxation or intentional space to plan or to do things is beneficial. And that's pretty much the realization I came from that first experience. And I went, oh, not only do I need to do this more, but like I need to talk about this, because the overall consensus of what floating was very hippie. I'm going to take mushrooms and go, it's just kind of the overall vibe is that. And I was like, oh, wait, this is a game changer if I can figure out how to make it happen.
Now, what do you think about, because you were saying it was part meditation, part self-discovery, and meditating, right? And could have done meditation, and like people have those moments, and there's different triggers, right? There's different reasons why people have an aha moment or a moment of self-discovery or being within deep meditation. You said you never had that opportunity before, right? To really do that. Why or what do you think it was about the floating therapy and the sensory deprivation specifically that made you have that moment, rather than just traditional meditation, rather than yoga, rather than, I don't know, just driving along a long road and then you're like, oh, like this is what I need to do. What about that particular experience, at least in your opinion, why do you think it triggered all that?
Yeah, it's extremely simple. It's the fact that there was no other distraction. With meditation, I've tried meditation, and it's like my brain, my foot feels a little weird, right? I'm trying to meditate, or I'm trying to do yoga, or even driving, or like there's that little brief distraction. And for me, floating, like there was no other. It was completely pitch black. I was floating. I was aware of my body, but like it was meditation with training wheels, essentially.
Okay.
So like once again, for me, like it was like, oh, like at the time I had tried meditation, I had tried yoga, I had tried some of those things, and it was like, oh, this is what the people that do those things are either chasing or trying to achieve. This was just a way for me to enter that door. So it's like, oh, maybe there's people like me that need this to enter that door to, find some sort of peace or relaxation within themselves.
So you have that experience, you want to go back, and you're like, hey, I need to talk about this. Wanting to go back and, continue a treatment, wanting to talk about something to everybody, and then being an evangelist in that sense is one thing. It's a whole other thing to want to go into business for yourself with that thing, especially if you're coming in from the outside and you haven't been in that space for the longest time, right? What was there a moment were you going there for a while, or were you maybe talking to people who ran the business? What was the moment of, or moments that led up to, hey, I really love this thing, I want everybody to know about it, to, I want to go into business on this thing?
It was the second or third time I went up there. I mean, granted, I'm based out of New Bedford, Mass, so it was hour and 15, hour and 20-minute ride up, floating for 90 minutes, and then an hour and 20-minute ride back. So the ride up and the ride back, I had a lot of time to think and digest what I was about to experience and what I would experience after. And literally, I think it was the second or third time, I was like, I need to make this happen. And not necessarily do I think that I could necessarily make it better, but I was just like, people need to have access to this that not only look like me, but like people in my family, people that I care about. And the effort for me to make that drive and to make that happen was like, I don't know if they'd do it, so I'm just going to build it. Like, that's just the way my mind works,
Brief side question, do you think that having that go type A personality helped or pushed you in the direction of like, yeah, this needs to be a business? Like, if you didn't have it, do you think maybe you would have had that thought, or like, oh, it would have just been like, I like going to this, I'm going to keep going and tell people to go to it?
Yeah, I think one thing feeds the other, right? Like the fact of my personality and then the experience and how much it changed my perspective. It made both of those things kind of feed themselves, right? Like, it's like, oh, I'm all about, like, everything that I do 110%. And then to have this thing and this experience that not only, I felt like it gave me like 120%. Like, I could put more effort into things and be more efficient. And it just put me in that place of like, no, I just got to build it. Like, I don't know. It was just it was just like, oh no, I have to build this. Like, that was just my thought. Like, I need to build something.
So you decide you're going to start a business. What was because everybody's first step is different. So what was the first step for you? Like, hey, this is thing number one that I have to do. And how scared or anxious or excited, or maybe a blend of those emotions, were you to take that first step?
Oh, like I said, second or third time I floated. I was like, oh, I want to start this. I started to research as many float centers, what they did, as far as experience-wise and packages and just what they were all about. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. I wasn't really anxious. I was, if anything, if I'm being 100% honest, I was overconfident. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to open this float center and people are going to show up. And like, I had some business experience with the trucking company, but
obviously... I was going to say, you started your own business before, but you said it was plug and play, whereas this is a world that you've been exposed to as a customer, but you're not like within that space where you know the ins and outs of that particular business type. Yeah.
I was ridiculously confident and unnecessarily so. I had no idea how much I didn't know.
Do you think that was beneficial?
Yes and no. I think about it sometimes, and actually recently, like as the business is growing and we're in a good place right now, I think about like if I would have told myself when I was starting out, hey, it's going to be 5 or 6 years in and the time and energy that I invested, would I be like, oh yeah, still as gung-ho? Probably not, Like I think me believing that, it would be easy allowed me to chase it, and then, a year in, 2 years, and it starts to get difficult, but it's like, no, I said I was going to do this, so I'm going to do this.
Now, you were mentioning you were doing research on these centers and things like that, and you wanted to make it so that people in your family had access, people like people that are not usually in that kind of, as you put it, like hippie wellness space, like had access to this and like how beneficial it was, right? And the reason why I find that part interesting is that you were doing the research into those centers, and originally, correct me if I'm wrong, the business was you were going to open up your own kind of like idea of like a wellness center, using that and maybe a couple of other different treatments. And then that's, now we're looking, hindsight 2020, that was not the business you ended up with. What made you pivot from, I'm going to open a location where somebody has to physically come to me and, pay me for the services that I offer, versus I'm going to offer a product that people can take home? And what was the moment or moments that made you pivot from one to the other? And how far along did you get into the idea of like opening a center where you're like, hey, I need to change course correction? Like, did you dump a lot of money into it, things of that nature, or were you like, was it still in the idea stage? And then you're like, wait a minute, let me do a 90-degree turn here.
Yeah. So 2017, winter of 2017, I had the opportunity to apply for an organization. It's called E4All. And basically what they do, it's an accelerator program in which you have the opportunity to go through 12 weeks of an intensive course to help you kind of build your business. So it goes through accounting, marketing, all the different aspects of business. You get mentors. And at the end, you potentially have an opportunity to get some capital as well. So I go through the program, still under the idea for Unplugged Float.
So you go into E4All with the idea of like, I'm going to do this wellness center
Yep.
idea. Okay.
Yep. So run through the program, finish the program, really jazzed about it, starting to realize I don't necessarily have as much knowledge as I thought, or it's not going to be as easy as I thought, but still put together a business plan, was geared up to open around 2018, started to shop around to get some loans. So and this is, once again, hindsight, right? Like looking into, walking into banks and going, hey, this is my business. This is my business plan. I need around $400,000 to start this business. Do you have any experience? No, I don't have any experience, but this thing is what I'm looking to do.
Quick question, why 400,000? Was just all the equipment,
for the equipment and everything.
And
Yeah.
because you weren't just going to do the flotation therapy. I'd read somewhere that you were also going to do like cryogenic therapy and all these other things.
Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was going big or go home, right?
that 0-100 type personality.
Yeah. So went to 3 or 4 different banks and went like, all right, and they were like, oh, this is a great idea. They were probably being nice, great idea, but unfortunately, you have some capital, but we can't give you a loan for that kind of money. And for about a month or so, I was starting to get really, really dejected. And I went like, okay, like what do I have? What am I trying to do? And like, what do I need? So I needed some capital, which I didn't have. I had a little bit of saved, but like nowhere near to make Float happen. I started at that time already, we started our social media and I was starting to talk about it and floating, and it was starting to get a little bit of love, which was cool. But I really didn't know who my customer was. I really didn't know how to market. And it just put me in a place of, okay, I could go all in with my trucking company and try to make as much money as possible and try to have the trucking company finance this idea.
But then couldn't that also lead to the burnout again?
Exactly.
So you're kind of like repeating the same mistake that led you to the business, but then it's giving you burnout. So like, and again, doing things smarter and supposed to be easier and all that jazz.
You're reading my mind. So it that was option A. And then option B was take the capital that I have, build a product which is reminiscent of floating, slowly, get that out. With that allows me to learn who my customer is, market my brand, get people along the journey of floating, right? Like it's not, because for a lot of people, floating is if, I talk to you and go, hey, I want you to get in a tank for 90 minutes with no lights and just float. You're like, I
love it. We were just joking how you couldn't do that at home, and then you literally created a somewhat of a way to do that at home, which I think is funny. Like we were joking like you couldn't do it at home, and then you're like, oh, well, actually, wait, hold on a second.
Yeah. So if I were to build a product that you could so the whole idea of the products that we offer now, or the original products, which we still offer, was taking a piece of your float home, and that's why I named after chess pieces and all that stuff. Like that's that's how that got there. So
I'm glad you mentioned E4All, because you briefly touched on it, and I was actually going to ask about it. You would have thought I would have planned this. I wish I was that smart to plan these things that well, but it's usually just off the cuff. Can you go a little bit more into E4All and what they do and what they walked you through, and just also how you found out about E4All? Because I feel like these kinds of programs are really important, but people don't know about them. I feel like sometimes it's like a marketing issue where not everybody knows about these things. So how did you find E4All? What did E4All do? Just go a little bit more in depth. And did E4All give you any ideas on pivoting away from, hey, you want to do this crazy, not crazy, but like you want to do this go big or go home thing, maybe you should go into this different direction.
Yeah, 100%.
If you could talk about that a little bit more, because I think that'd be beneficial for anybody listening.
Yeah, so E4All is an organization. When I went through them, I believe they had 2, maybe 3 different locations in which they offered their accelerator. With that, I found out about them through a friend of mine that I went to high school with on Facebook. He was posting about it, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting or whatever. But I wasn't really engaging with it or looking into it seriously until the idea for Unplugged Float happened. So it's eforall.org. They're amazing. They do pitch contests, and they also do the accelerator program. They're actually gearing up to do one now. Interestingly enough, I'm in the process of mentoring for my 4th time with them since, getting out of the program and, working with them and taking applications and all that stuff. But basically, it's a 12-week program that goes over almost every aspect of your business. You at 2 to 3 times a week, and then you also have 3 mentors allotted to you. In pretty much, they help you through the overall course, as well as they help mentor you to get you to the next phase of your business, wherever you are on that. And then at the end of the program, which the program in total is a year, but like the accelerator is 12 weeks, you have an opportunity to win some prize money, man. And it's all free, and it's just a time investment. And if you're serious about your business, like, it's a no-brainer. Like, to me, if you're trying to start a business, and I'm sure there are other accelerators, which I would also probably recommend, but E4All, from my personal experience, is a game changer.
Did you have to, if you can touch upon this a little bit more, like, is there like an acceptance process where it's like, hey, they're not taking in everybody?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, and like, how do they vet like who they take? If you can walk through that,
actually,
that process a little bit more in depth, just so people know it's like, hey, here's what to expect if you apply. And I know every accelerator is going to be different, but like, here's what to expect if you apply to one of these accelerator type programs, like how they're going to like vet you out and how, I don't think they're expecting you to have everything figured out, because then why would you need them? But you must have some ducks in a row, I'm assuming.
Literally from 8 a.m. this morning to 1 p.m., I was interviewing entrepreneurs for the new cohort. So I'm actually a part of that process now. And basically what it is you apply online. They run cohorts to like a winter and a summer cohort. And basically it's just giving the information, how long you've been in business, where you are, some of the, roadblocks, what you need help with, and, just basic application. And then from there, you go into an interview process and take about 20 minutes, a half hour, and just to get a better idea of what your business is, where you are, and if we can actually help. Because some businesses are further along, some are just ideas. Are you open to potentially pivoting? And, where are you not only in your process, but your drive and what you're looking to do? So, I mean, it's not like only businesses that are going to make $1 million or something. Like, it's right, not, it's more.
It's not Shark Tank.
No, exactly. Like, if you're making something in your kitchen and you want to turn it into an idea, like, you have an opportunity. I mean, maybe not everybody, but if you're looking to take it to that next level, like, just the information and if you show your passion behind it, like,
I'm guessing. So they cover everything from A to Z, like probably the legal stuff too.
Yeah,
like especially if like if you, LLC, and probably also even if you're like, I want to make something in my kitchen, it's like, okay, we're gonna need these licenses, or you can't do it out of your kitchen. You're gonna have to like find a kitchen facility somewhere because of
and here are these resources, and then you might get a mentor that works in the food industry, so maybe they can help you with different aspects that are specific to your industry. There's website guys, and so just the access to information and people and networking and just being surrounded by people that are passionate about the thing that they do is something that, like, that's an intangible thing, right? Like, you got this crazy idea to start a business, and then you have 12 to 15 other crazy people that want to start businesses, and you're all working together.
All right. So I have I don't want to say a brief side question. This is probably not going to be brief, but I feel like it's important we touch on this, because I'm glad you brought up E4All. And the reason why I'm going more in depth on the E4All stuff, again, I think it's beneficial to anybody listening to this and anybody trying to start their own business, right? So I'll start off with this, because once you answer, I'm going to ask the other parts of this question. I feel like let me just start off with simply, do you think you could have still have done this business, or do you think it'd be as far along as it is today without E4All?
100% no.
Okay. Good. That leads to my next part. Is that, I've had, and this is no offense to the people that say this, I've had people say like, hey, the information's out there. Just go on Google. You could search for stuff on Google. And I'm like, that's great. The information is out there, right? It is. The answers are out there. That's very true. But Google does not put the spark or the idea in your brain to go search out a thing like E for All. Like Google can't tell you, oh, hey, go search out an accelerator, right? You found out about it through a friend. Sometimes people have the privilege of being in a nice area or money or having influential friends or maybe friends or family that have already started businesses or even parents who have started businesses, right? Maybe they may go to a good school where they can be around like-minded people and connect. But not everybody has that. So I can only imagine how many good or great businesses never got started because of just not even access to resources, just access to the information of like what's possible or like what can be done or that there's even help out there.
Yeah, in your circle around you, right? Like I'm the only person that has this idea, and my friends are like, "Oh, that's crazy."
That's crazy.
Or, yeah.
And then you can't find anything else, or you can't find like the people that can support it. What do you think? Just because it's like, hey, these accelerators exist, or sometimes I've interviewed people where like they'll start the business and they're like, oh, I wish I would have found out about this accelerator earlier, or this program earlier, or this loan program earlier, or this thing earlier. Do you think that that's an issue where it's just like, it seems like these ideas and these resources are not available to everyone? And what do you think can be done so that more people know and have access to like an E4All, more people know about these programs? Because it seems like it's almost like, oh, I've never even heard of this thing, and like unless you meet them at like a conference or something, or like you have a friend, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I wonder if it's like a marketing issue or is it just getting the word out issue? But it's interesting to hear this, because I keep hearing about accelerators, but it's like not everybody knows about them.
Yeah, it's difficult, and I go back and forth. Like obviously, I try to be a mouthpiece for them, and us talking about it. But
Hence why I want to cover on the show.
Yeah, in one sense of the word, or I look at it in two different ways. So, in order to be a successful business owner, I believe you have to have a certain type of tenacity in which you're willing to either sacrifice or succeeding in whatever that means to you is your number one objective. So with that, the universe, you're searching things at 2 a.m., like you'll come across it. You know what I mean? Like granted, I believe we could do a better job as far as marketing and getting all that stuff out there. But part of me is like, if you're about that life, it kind of comes into your world, The other side of it is just knowing what to look for and having that kind of critical idea or like that critical thinking of like, okay, I want to start a business. I want to name it Joe's Hot Dogs or something like that. Maybe I Google Joe's Hot Dogs and see if there's anything like that out there, or like starting my journey in a very like pragmatic way, right? Like those are some things that are innately attributes of entrepreneurs. So I don't know. Like I think we need to talk about it more and give people more access. But at the same time, at the end of the day, what is it? Like 75, 80%?
You have to want to go after it.
Yeah, 75, 80% of the businesses fail. And like, that's okay. But like, you got to know, like, it's not for everybody too. Right? Like, as much as I want to see everybody succeed and all that, like, it's an interesting juggling act of like, okay, accessibility and success in building something sustainable. And, if it was, all those, interesting quotes, if it was easy, everybody would do it. There's a tinge of that, in the aspect of having access to information, because we all have access essentially to the same information now with the internet and all that stuff. So it's a tricky one for me. I have a hard time answering that internally of like how we make it either more accessible or like easier for people to start their own process.
You were talking about E4All, how you do get some funding, right?
Yeah.
And was that the main source of funding for your business? Did you actually, you were talking about trying to get bank loans for the first ideation of the business, and it was, it was way too grandiose, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Did you eventually get bank loans? Did you have some of your own funds? Was it a mix? How did you fund, and we're gonna finally get into it, folks. Don't worry. We're gonna get into what the actual business is and what it is today, but we gotta lead it up to it. How did you actually fund all of this in the beginning? Was it a mix of all three, like the loans, some from the accelerator, some from your own personal? And what do you think good ways are to fund a business, now that you have hindsight?
Yeah, for me, at the time when I was searching for loans, I was saving money. I owned a trucking company, and we were fairly successful. I had one truck, maybe two trucks at the time, but that was running. So I did have a little bit of personal, with all personal capital. I'd say about $15,000, maybe $20,000. I had saved up, and at that critical point, I took that money because I knew, I wasn't going to be able to get a loan, and I went, okay. Literally, and I have a screenshot, I'll show it to you, of like my initial idea of, okay, Epsom salt costs this much for this amount of pounds, and labels roughly this amount, and I ran it all down, and I was like, okay, I can make 1,000 of these things. How much can I sell them for? And that was how the business started. It was like, okay, I got this amount of cash. Let me give this a go, and at the very least, I'll learn something. And luckily, we're here 5 years later, and growing, but that was how Unplugged started. Now, for the most part, granted, we were looking for a decent amount of capital for our initial loan, but even trying to get small loans for an unproven business or idea is extremely difficult. So you kind of got to make do with what you have,
So all this leads to, we're finally there, folks. All of this leads to your business, Unplugged Essentials. So can you briefly describe, because it's probably changed from then to now, how it looked and what the first product was, and where did you make it? Did you make it in your kitchen? Did you make it somewhere else? And what was that first product? How did it look? Did you have the website? Where did you make that first sale? What led up to the first sale, and how did that all come about?
So once again, going through E4All and meeting other entrepreneurs, I made friends with a myriad of other business owners that we either have insight on different aspects of business that I wasn't really privy to, whether it be some packaging ideas or, recipe ideas. So with that, I built everything out, decided on my packaging, decided on kind of
what... You were naming things after chess pieces and stuff like that?
Yeah, okay. And then, and slowly kind of like building it out. So we started with the original four products, and it was all based on like research, what's out there, what could we do better. Like how my business mind works is I go, okay, I have an idea, and all right, this idea is X. Let me see if anybody else is doing it. Okay, there's some people that are kind of doing it, but my idea is a little bit different. Or how could I do it better than
how can I stand out in the marketplace?
Yeah, exactly. So, with the product development, I knew I wanted it to be an Epsom salt base, and then I started doing a ton of research on essential oils because I wanted it to be extremely simple, but also a sensory experience, and went down that rabbit hole. And
which is kind of interesting because the whole idea, the first thing I inspired this was, not to interrupt your train of thought, but like to sensory deprivation. Then you're adding essential oils. It's like, oh, let's add some sensory into the thing where we're trying to get people to do sensory deprivation, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, so the idea, it being a piece of floating, I was looking at it from the perspective of not the sensory deprivation aspect, but the aspect of recovery.
Okay.
So with that,
I want to hold on to that. Keep going, but I want to hold on to that because I got some questions about that too.
Yeah. So, so the idea, like the physical recovery of floating, and how can we expand upon that? So we can play with the senses, whether it be the scent profiles of the product, and that's why we have our Pawn, Knight, Queen, and King. Pawn is unscented, Knight being a little punny. It's a lavender for nighttime. Queen, which the idea and the concept was like, what would a queen need to recover? So very earthy, good for muscles, cramps, and stuff like that. And then finally the King, which is what a king need to recover. It's a eucalyptus blend that also helps with mental clarity, focus, like really refreshing scent, invigorating scent. So I had the essential oils, I had the Epsom salt, and I was like, oh. And at the time, once again, we were 2017, 2018, I started doing some research, and I'm like, oh, there's this thing, hemp, coming out. What's the hemp CBD and all this other stuff? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, what's that? It helps with inflammation. It helps with stuff. Okay, maybe I can add this into the product. Let me see what that looks like. And then that's how it all kind of started with the recipe side of it.
Can you go into that a little bit more? What made you want to, go in, use hemp and CBD as an ingredient? Because not every, bath salt or salts company, or I was gonna say bathing salt, but bath salts company does that. So was it from your own curiosity and research? Was it you tested it out and it was more effective than not? Like, did you come out the gate with that, or were you doing the product already and then you were adding the hemp and CBD later?
No, so still in the still kind of in the research recipe phase, and it was solely. And like, this is what, like, I never had the intention of getting in a space that was extremely restrictive and trendy with the CBD, right? Like it was just okay, how can I make this the best recovery experience possible for the bath? What are things that are out there that can enhance that experience organically, and how can I implement them? And through that research came hemp CBD, and I tried it, and I was like, I had been trying it actually with tinctures, and then I went like, okay, to me, putting CBD oil in a bath doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense, right? Oil and water doesn't really mix, and this in maybe, you know, there are some bath products that incorporate it in that way, but just from a purely like logical, logistical standpoint, I went like, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Let me see if there's any type of powder or something that's made to be in, you know, dissolved in water. I ended up finding a company out of Colorado that was making a product, pioneering in the industry, that was making a water soluble product, and then tried it, and I was like, oh snap, this is legit. Now let's hit the ground running.
People change, goals change, and at times, your business will need to change too. We've talked about mastering the art of the pivot on this show before, and Kevin had to do just that. Kevin's original goal of creating a flotation recovery and wellness center would have taken funding beyond his savings and what banks were willing to give him. Instead of seeing this as a setback, Kevin then focused and realigned on the goal of giving the flotation recovery experience he had to as many people as possible. With this goal realignment, he was able to create an entire line of products that were able to achieve that goal, and then some. The lesson here is that it's okay to redefine and readjust your goals throughout your journey. Doing so, along with your ability to pivot, may bring you greater success than you previously imagined. Speaking of moments of like, oh, this is legit now, holy crap, oh snap. Can you describe, if you can remember, when and where the first sale was and how that felt?
Well, I had my first real sale. I don't think I remember. I think it was probably on the website, like our first day that we launched. My first two like official sales was my girlfriend and my grandmother, which was cool, you know, but you know, obviously they know and the product and all that stuff. But yeah, the first sale, as far as what I remember from it, I remember it was on opening day and it was on the website. But other than that, I don't really recall the experience of it.
So you said that opening day, how did you get people to come to the website and actually want to buy it? Because, you know, certain businesses, they'll go to like events and they'll make some first sales and then people know about it. Like, you know, they'll either be at an event or a trade show or something like that and they'll know about it. And then people tell their friends, and, you know, some people use social media. How did you go about getting the word out that you have this company to the point where when you have the opening day of the website that people can buy, and, you know, more than, you know, I'm assuming more than one person or at least one person bought it, because you could have no people, if depending on if nobody knows you're around. You could have the best product in the world. If nobody knows about it, does it really matter? So how did you go about that, and how much time and effort were spent on that?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm sorry I'm taking the long way around in all these, but it's been an interesting journey. So finished the product, the recipes, and then, you know, I had the labels, you know, the overall packaging, the overall thing that I wanted to sell. Then I was like, okay, well, I need a photographer to take pictures of this, and then need to build out a website. All in this same kind of time frame. We already had the social media for the Float Center, and for what that was planning to become. So the people that were following along and interested in what the Float Center was going to be, I started to talk about this journey, and we had to segue, and this is what we're looking to do.
Was that tough, like pivoting from like, hey, you were building everybody up for a float center, now it's like, and we're gonna do this different thing?
I mean, we maybe had 200-300 followers. Like it wasn't it wasn't like a massive thing, because once again, I still didn't really understand at that point like what the marketing looked like, what the customers looked like. So it just was, okay, I'm slowly gonna build a website. I'm gonna build every touch point possible. Like I designed the labels, and I I just did everything to the best of my abilities with what I had, and made the social media match that, and just told the story along the way. And by no means, did I make a ton of money, but we got a couple of sales, just people that were invested in that journey with me and watching the process of it. And that's just how it started.
In the beginning, and even now, because I've read that it's a three-person team. Was it all you in the beginning, or was it that same 3-person team in the very beginning of this business? And how much were you doing? And did you realize, did you want to have to like touch every part of the business basically, or every part of the process, or was it like, hey, I don't have enough money to hire a person, so I'm just gonna have to do all this?
It was kind of both. I did try to outsource some things, and I didn't have the capital readily available. But at the same time, sometime there was a few things that I did outsource that I wasn't necessarily as happy as I thought I would be with, having other people come in and work on it, because I felt very confident in what I had for the vision of what the brand would be. So I've embarked upon this journey. The idea of the float center, or even the products, it's never really been like, I'm going to build a business. It was just like, this is really cool, and I want to offer this thing. And to me, it's a part of me. So it was like, how can I learn to be better? The same way I learned how to kickbox or play the saxophone. Like, I want to learn more notes. I want to learn more punches, and I want to learn this thing. So that's kind of how it put me in the position of, I'm approaching it as, I want to learn as much as possible. So I'm going to touch everything and make it as cohesive as possible. So then it's a thing. And then, luckily now we're in, a place where I'm outsourcing things more. And, and to answer you as well, it was just, at that time, it was just me and launching the product. And then my sister came on, my girlfriend came on to help as we started to grow.
So you're mentioning before about the CBD space and the wellness space, which I want to talk about, because there is some perception stuff going on. It's going to lead into my next question as well. And there's even some perception stuff with bath salts. I don't know if it was at the same time, but there was the story of like people were getting high off bath salts, and then the dude ate the other dude's face, which I think inspired the name of one of my favorite groups, Flatbush Zombie.
Oh yeah.
I think that actually inspired the name of Flatbush Zombies, if I'm not mistaken. So you have like that horrific thing going on, and like that for a while was in the news because of the that, but it was also like just on like people were it was bath salts from God knows where, and people were getting high, and it was. So you have that. Then you have the wellness space, and these wellness gurus, who some of them are very upfront about their product. Some are like, this thing is gonna cure everything, because and now there's this whole industry of self-care, and some of it's good, and some of it you look at it, at least me personally, and there's probably some people listening who would agree, and you're nodding your head of like, this is completely ridiculous.
I don't feel comfortable saying it out loud, but I agree with everything that you're saying.
Right? And I think it was a more high profile version of that was I think it was Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. They actually got a lawsuit because it was getting there's one thing to make claims, and there's another thing to make claims so outrageous that there's legal trouble. And I think they just paid the fine because they were making so much money. Yeah. They're like, whatever, we'll just pay this fine. In the CBD space, there's also, I think for a while, it seemed like every week I was seeing a new CBD shop pop up, and it's like, what the heck is going on? When you were starting this business, what were some of your gripes or some things you saw with the wellness space, the CBD space, as far as misconceptions or people faking the funk, so to speak? And what were your opinions on that? And did that worry you at all, where you're like, oh, I'm going to have to fight some of this perception BS? Because, there was, and I think there still is. And I want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, there's so much. Oh, this is such a fun conversation, man. There's so much with the industry. I don't even know where to begin. So at the time, when I was starting Unplugged Essentials and doing a bath soak, there was 2 to 3 other competitors in the space that I had seen, and I was going crazy with my research. They offered things a little similar, but for the most part, there was 2 to 3 companies doing it. Now, there's got to be at least 20 to 25, never mind bath bombs and other things within that kind of like bath space. With that being said, for me and what I'm offering, I try to just stay in my own lane, man. Like the thing that I'm doing is I'm trying to be not a CBD company. The original objective was a wellness center, which I'd like to get back to that as we move forward, but I don't view myself or Unplugged as a CBD company, so I try to do things in a different manner and approach it in a different manner and how I talk about it. Like that's only an ingredient, right? Like we're not not everything that I plan to offer has CBD, so I try to stay away from that kind of. That's who we are, because at the end of the day, that's just an ingredient. And a lot of companies, since the time of us starting to now to as I'm sure in the future, like a lot have come and gone just because like you're an ingredient based company that everybody has access to and anybody can start a business with that. But your idea is you're going to build a brand around it. So how are you going to build a brand around it if your product is the same as everybody else? Like what makes you different other than your marketing? So I just try to stay out of that lane and just offer the best product possible and do things as righteously as I can with building what we offer in our products and just try to stay out of that whole world. Unfortunately, like we can't advertise on social media because of CBD. Our payment processing costs.
I was about to ask, like, is there legal issues with CBD and things of that nature and payment processing and all that? And like, what headaches have you gone through because of that?
Yeah, like payment processing, like I pay probably most places maybe like 3.6% time and then plus 10 cents or something per transaction, roughly. Some people can get it less, but I'm probably 2% more than that per transaction because I'm a high risk, which I don't understand what that means. I can't advertise on any social media, Google, nothing will touch us because our product has CBD in it, and that's an illicit drug, even though it's nationally recognized. So basically I'm running uphill with with all that aspect of trying to like build the brand and get it out there. And I mean, majority of the companies also, go through that. Some, companies have broke through and be able to have some workarounds, but yeah, it's been a kind of an uphill battle with that stuff.
And even with all that, you're still like, nope, I'm going to have CBD in the product, even with all the legal and uphill battle issues.
Yeah, once again, like, it just made sense. I mean, I could have taken it out, but I don't think the product, in my opinion, would have been different enough and unique enough in order for me to put my personal stamp behind the scenes on it to go, like, I'm offering something of value.
Yeah.
Like, because once again, the objective was never like, oh, I want to make $1 million off of this idea. Like, that wasn't the thing. Like, it was like, I want to create something great and of value. So with that, it was like, I believe in this thing in its entirety, and like, I got to deal with the ramifications that I have to deal with because of it.
Do you ever, cause, I was briefly talking before about some people making these outrageous claims, and you are definitely not that guy and definitely not that company. Does it worry you though that, even though you can't advertise, if you say something about the story or something in the product description, if it's not received the right way, that somebody could, take it the wrong way and be like, oh, I used these salts and I thought I was going to, I don't know, like, I felt like I was going to feel amazing. I didn't. So like, F this company or F this product, right? Like, cause I think sometimes, again, in the wellness space, it's personal self-care and that's a great thing. But then there's also people out there who I think take it to the extreme, and it's like, I don't need to go see a doctor. I'm just going to take this product. Right. Does that ever worry you in the back of your head? Like, hey, like somebody may just take it the wrong way and take it to an extreme. And it's like, no, you're really injured. You need to like go to a doctor and recover instead of like just using like, hey, thanks for using my product, but you actually need to like go see someone, not just use this thing.
Yeah, the other day, a very good friend of mine, we were talking and he shot me a text and he was like, hey, my father-in-law is looking into CBD because he has all kinds of joint pain and he wants to know which one you would recommend and the dosages and all that stuff. And I went, how's his diet? He's like, what do you mean how's his diet? I'm like, well, majority of inflammation is caused dietarily. So I would start there before you kind of go down that rabbit hole of different CBD companies. I'm like, there's some companies that I believe in, and I kind of pointed them in the right direction. But for my kind of mission statement and brand and what we're offering, like I if anything, I want to over deliver and under promise. So I want to make the experience on the front end as unique and engaging as possible, but I want the product to speak for itself. So I try not to go like this will cure everything.
There are people out there who do that.
Oh, dude, yeah. This will help your eczema, your backiotomy. It'll do everything, and that's fine. And maybe that sells things, but like at the end of the day, the objective of what I'm trying to do with Unplugged as a whole is to get people to unplug from distractions, look at their life in a pragmatic way, whether that be through meditation, my products, floating, or sitting in the room alone, and allow themselves the opportunity to unplug, recover, and evolve, and whatever that is for them. I'd like it to be my products, and I think I offer a way to get you started there. But if you can do that, you can succeed, and then we all succeed, right? Like maybe that's my hippie float story, I guess.
So speaking of hippie float story, there was, you were saying earlier how you went to one of these centers and you were like, oh, this is like a hippie thing. You're an MMA guy and you were skeptical. You thought you were going to be underwhelmed. Then we're talking about perceptions in the wellness space. Like there's this idea, there's this like there's perception there. Whether good or bad depends on the person, how they're viewing it, right? Same with the CBD space. What I've noticed about your company and with you is that you have this a little bit more of a specific niche where it's like, yes, the unplugged part, but also the recovery part. And I don't think there's many companies in the wellness and CBD space that are focused on recovery from almost like the athlete perspective. Not that yours is strictly that. Like one company comes to mind, it's like Mendy, like CBD company.
Yeah,
Megan
yeah.
Rapinoe runs Mendy, but that's what makes that stand out is that it almost has like it's like a CBD company, but it has like a Nike Gatorade type feel to it almost,
100%.
which makes it different. Now with yours, you've niched down, a bit more that, hey, we're not just a CBD company. Hey, we're not just this wellness company. Like we make these products for recovery and like for you to unplug, things of that nature. That niching down, was that intentional from day one, or is that just more of a natural thing of you being you and where you wanted to take the brand? And how beneficial was it that you were able to niche down in order for you to run this business successfully?
Yeah, I think from the jump, the idea was Unplugged Float, and I looked it up. There was nothing like that named, and got the website and got all that stuff. But the overall idea was unplugging from distraction. That's kind of like where it started, and the idea of floating being a vessel for that. And as the business evolved and I pivoted and gone into the products and what they are and why they are and the ingredients and all that, that was kind of the guiding light of going like, this is a thing to help people unplug from their constant distractions, whether it be on their phone or being overwhelmed or being stressed out or being type A, and giving them a way to, or at least a callback into recognizing they need to take a moment for themselves. And this was kind of like before self-care became as big as it is.
Right.
Granted, my marketing and all that stuff, we haven't got to the point where like we're as known, but I think it just was the guiding light of what Unplugged is, and then just following that throughout the whole process, whether it be the naming or the products or blah, 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 blah. It's just like, that just happened. I just wanted to stay on course, and I think that was, it came from me having my hands on every aspect of everything that we did, and the mission was so regimented, and so it made it super cohesive.
So it leads perfectly to my next question. why the name and the branding of Unplugged Essentials? And sub question to that, because we're sitting here, we're in New Bedford. So why Unplugged Essentials? Why that name and branding? And why New Bedford? Why not be in Boston? Why not be in, try to run out of a bigger city?
Yeah, so Unplugged Essentials was just kind of building off of the Unplugged float, which was going to be the idea of the wellness center. And I went like, okay, what is an essential aspect of the float experience? And that would be the Epsom salt. So it was kind of like working backwards in the sense of building out the idea for the brand and going like, okay, like I'm not going to call it Unplugged float salts. Right? That doesn't make sense. So, okay, okay, these things are essential for the throat process. Blah, 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 blah. So it kind of was built on that. And then the reason for New Bedford is born and raised here. I lived in Boston for a little while, and this city is, to me, an amazing place and an opportunity zone. And I've just slowly been, building everything out here in an effort to not only help myself in the business, but, help people in the community and try to be a part of that, overall growth process with New Bedford as a whole, as well as my business.
Do you think there are, a quick side question, do you think there's advantages? Because I think, the reasoning is sound of like wanting to go to certain cities, depending on your industry and depending on what you're trying to do. And then there's more people and more network, possibly more funding money, et cetera. The flip side of that, do you think that there's specific advantages in working in smaller towns or cities when trying to have a business?
I think so. But once again, I touched upon it earlier, like the tenacity of the business owner. Like if I had the idea for Unplugged Essentials before Flow, or like if I knew what the business was going to become, there's definitely more efficient ways that I could get to the point that I'm at. But what I've learned along the process and where the business is now, like it just is because of the journey that it took, and I'm happy with that. I think people need to have the mindset, like as far as business owners, have the mindset of like, just start where you are, man. Like if we were going to go into like a workout analogy, right? Like I'm not going to, walk into the gym that I haven't been in, X amount of time, or maybe never been, and try to lift as much weight as possible, right? Maybe you're going to walk first. Maybe you're going to do something small first. And that's the same way you can approach starting a business, right? Like, what do you have accessible to you? How can you leverage that to gain momentum to start to build the thing that you're trying to do?
And then scale from there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to come back to the scaling part a little bit later. We were talking about perception and things of that nature, and you have your unique voice, and so does your brand. I have heard that you consume a number of books about storytelling. Example being from Seth Godin. How important do you think storytelling is when it comes to a brand or a business, and how do you personally go about storytelling when it comes to the brand that we're talking about today, Unplugged Essentials?
Yeah. So, I don't read as much as as I'd like, but I'm extremely passionate about storytelling, and I think it harkens back to me being a musician and me being a fighter and me being a coach. Like, to me, those are all the same things. And usually the connotation of my next word is, negative, but it's a manipulation thing, right? It could be like telling a joke or trying to evoke an emotion from the person that's receiving the information. And with that, for your brand, whether that be something tactile, whether that be something, the copy, the overall idea, like, what do you want it to look and feel like, number one, and then number two, how do you want the person that's interacting with that to feel, and what you want, like, what do you want the response to that to be? And to me, that's one of the most important things a business can do to not only make their brand kind of cohesive, but to get and find the customers that will resonate with what they do the most. Like it's like matchmaking, right? Like, where, if I'm trying to get a certain type of person to engage me with, what do they normally engage with? What am I drawn to innately, whether it be colors or feels or things of that nature, right? It's all a part of the story that you can build upon.
Speaking of storytelling and getting a story out there. I've heard that you are restricting what you post on social media and maybe even the frequency of posting on social media because you have this brand Unplugged Essentials and you want people to unplug. So posting on social media all the time kind of goes against the idea of unplugging, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, social media is the way people advertise now. It's the way people see brands. It's the way you get the word out. So how do you balance those two? And, how can other brands, what advice would you have just from your own experience? How can other brands use social media as like a way to get the word out and, sell product, tell the brand story? How do you reconcile that where like the idea of social media almost goes against with what your brand is? Because it's a very weird balancing act.
It is.
And I think you're doing it. I think you're doing it pretty damn well. But just from your own experience, like how did you reconcile that and go like, oh, wait a minute, these two don't necessarily jive together, and sometimes they do, right? And so if they don't, how do you balance it out? And what can other brands do? Just from your own experience, what advice would you have?
Yeah, I don't recommend not being on social media as much as we are. It's definitely made things a lot more difficult as far as like the scalability, and it's challenged me. But once again, the objective of the brand and what it means to me in wanting to be as righteous as possible in what I offer, it just didn't make a ton of sense. So I went, okay, I'm not going to post as much on social media, but what can I do in order to still interact with people that want to engage with us? So we've been, really active with our newsletter and letting people know, what's going on with us if you choose to engage with us. The same thing, in the process of me starting the podcast, which I haven't been as consistent as I like, but that's another way where you can consume content from us or stay in touch with what we're doing in a way that's more not invasive. It's more like, if you're interested in this, here's a way to have access to this. I definitely would recommend people being more consistent than we are if it jives with what they are trying to achieve in their business and what their business is. With all of that being said, though, the time and energy it takes to build out your social media and make all of your content, that is also a decent amount of time that you could be investing in other aspects of your business that could be as much of value, if not more. So with us not posting as much on social media, literally it was anywhere from 20 to 25 hours a week that was allocated to that, whether it be the post, the content, and all that other stuff. So now you have 20 to 25 hours in which I decided to my sister was taking care of that, and I went, okay, reach out to as many retailers, small businesses that we could potentially be interacting with, whether it be wholesale or whatever, versus posting on social media. And then that's how we started to build our wholesale and where we're carried and all that stuff, versus just posting on social media and people know a lot about us, which is cool, but like that doesn't necessarily translate to sales, which we need to generate more money so then we can build the business.
So speaking of hours and work spent, can you walk through the process of how you even put together even like just your core products in the beginning, or even like if you're going to come out with a new version of like I don't want to say flavor because it's like people are tasting, but that's the only version you come up with. Right. Because like you have, Knight versus Queen versus X versus Y. So they're different. It's not just one product you're selling. But how do you come up with the recipe for each product? How do you have them differentiate? How do you go, okay, we're going to have this one with this purpose, and then this one's going to be for this purpose? How do you just go from like, I have the idea to add a new product to the lineup. Okay, how are we going to build out the recipe? All right, we're going to have to test it. Okay, that's, version 1. Let's do version 2. And then how do you figure out, okay, this is the one we're going to go to market with? Can you walk through that just from like idea to, okay, this is the new product on the site? Because I think people would benefit from hearing that. Because I find that stuff fascinating. I think hearing that process would probably be beneficial.
Yeah, initially, it was very kind of shooting from the hip. Like I have an idea, and then, through twists and turns, accessibility of products, readily available products or ingredients, and like trying to figure out what that is was kind of like the driving factor, like in the very, very beginning. Moving forward, as the business started to expand and adding more product, and it's very similar to kind of what we were talking about, more products, but very similar to what we were talking about more towards the beginning of the conversation. It was, I have an idea, like with our King Muscle Bomb and our Queen Body Butter, which we released this year. I went, okay, I'd like to do, once again, we started with the idea, we have our king, what would a king need to recover? Queen, what would a queen need to recover? A king would need a muscle bomb, right? That kind of makes sense logically. Okay, what would a king, right? Okay, who is this archetypical chess piece character? What would they need to recover and what type of ingredients? Okay, you probably would use something like a tiger bomb. Okay, what's in tiger bomb? What do they use in tiger bomb? Okay, they use like a fractionated coconut oil. They use this type of ingredient, Okay, what are some ingredients that could potentially be better? What are some ingredients that I could use to enhance the experience, right? It's like, okay, well, we already carry, CBD products. I'd like to incorporate CBD, but also like, what are some other cannabinoids that could be of value? Oh, okay, CBG is also not only an inflammatory, it's also an antibacterial. So, okay, I have this athlete that's working out that wants to put something on their body, right? They're probably sweating a lot. So, okay, CBG would make sense. And then CBD and CBG is an amazing, they work synergistically together. So like, okay.
What's CBG real quick?
It's another cannabinoid. So,
okay.
So like THC, CBD, CBG, CBC, CBA. There's a bunch. So for those, so the Muscle Bomb and the Body Butter, and I'm just taking, the journey down the king, but like, it was just like, okay, it ties into your storytelling, kind of the question as well. It's like, okay, what is the story of these characters? Like, I built these characters, which I built these products, and they're based on scent profiles and archetypes. So the king is this, and this is what he needs to recover, and this is what we're building on. And that's my guiding light. So it's like, okay, an idea for a muscle bomb. And, we're in the process of developing some new products that are more scent profile based without CBD. We're doing some cold press soaps and stuff, and we're trying to develop that. But it once again, like, once you start to, what I would assume is, once you develop the characters, it's easy to put them in a scenario in which you have a story. So once I kind of built the idea of Unplugged and the chess piece theme and what that is and what the objective of or the reasoning behind that, it became easier to allow the creativity to flow to develop products just based on like this logically, to me anyway, makes sense as far as things that can go together or what the objective is of the product. So it's like the experience I want to offer, and then what are things that support that experience.
Question on that. Who is Amy at Bridgestone Apothecary?
Oh, she's a very good friend of mine that
referred to as an ingredient guru.
Yeah, she's a bad MFer. She went through Eferol with me as well, and what we ended up, we became friends just because her business is Bridgestone Apothecary. She offers skincare and very simply made in products that are based off of Ayurvedic principles. And she just kind of helped me start the journey of my thought process on the products with a very simple question. And at the time, I was going to her, asking her about essential oils, because she knew a lot about essential oils. Like, I kind of had ideas on what I wanted it to smell like, but I was like, okay, can you help me with the essential oils? And like, at the time, I didn't even know like the chess piece idea or anything like that. Like, I'm like, okay, I want to make 4 different unique scents. And like, I want one like refreshing and I want one like this. And she said, okay. So she sent me some resources. We had a bunch of conversations about the different benefits of the essential oils and, which ones, have, various benefits and where they could potentially go. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at it and I'm coming back to her and we're going back and forth. And then she asked me this question, which changed everything in my thought process, where she was like, Kevin, like, how do you want it to feel? Like, not what are the benefits or what does it smell like? Like, what is the feeling of the product? And I'm like, oh, for the king, I want it to be like you're sitting in like an old leather chair, and like started to talk, like I started to story tell essentially. And then we're like, okay, so then maybe some clove, which, the king does have a clove, peppermint, spearmint, like that type of energy. And like, that's what kind of took me down that journey. So like I owe a ton to her. And yeah, so that's Amy.
So you just stated you owe a ton to Amy because she was asking you certain questions that made you rethink. It's like, oh, and you had to rethink the process a little bit. So she definitely helped you out. I want to ask, how important do you think it is for, the reason why I'm asking this, because I think there's this perception today where when it comes to businesses, they have like the mouthpiece, and then like, but we as a society make it seem like they were self-made, like nobody helped them out, and like they just did everything themselves. Obviously, that's not the case. Very or extremely rarely is that the case. How important do you think it was for you, and how important do you think it is for business owners to realize, especially for someone who's like, go, let's go all in, realize, oh, this is an area I need help. Like you went to E for All and you got help. You went to Amy and you got help about like what, from the ingredients perspective and how do you want things to feel. How important was it for you to not be an island unto yourself and recognize like, hey, I need help with this, and reach out for that help and to be able to do that? Because not everybody wants to admit they need help, and they're like, I could do everything myself. And it's like, okay, but it might be easier if, or you might be able to get to your goal faster if you just go to this other person who may have an expertise in an area that you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I still struggle with that, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of things that I probably could ask for help for that I don't. One, I'm super passionate and like I'm just all in. But with that being said, I think specifically having the humbleness and the perspective of challenging yourself. So majority of people, my girlfriend is actually a prime example. She just recently started a business and she's growing. She's in her second year. She owns an ice cream business called Sorbet Frozen Treats out of New Bedford. But with that being said, she very much is type A like myself and can work 80, 90 hours a week and loves doing everything on her own, and she's going to get it done because she can do it right. And that's a fair mindset, especially starting out in business. And, I get it, right? Because it's, it's your baby. But with that being said, like, how do you succeed in anything that you're trying to achieve? And I believe that to be to challenge yourself. So challenging yourself isn't necessarily working harder. Challenging yourself is challenging yourself. So what are some things that you do or don't do because it challenges you? So for Monica, my girlfriend, or even myself, which we were talking about recently, a challenge to me is, taking some time to myself, or outsourcing, or giving somebody else the responsibility, or asking for help. That's challenging to me because I go, screw it, I want to do it myself, or I could do it myself. So in that process of going like, all right, like in order for me to get to the next level, all right, I'm at a plateau, I need to challenge myself, right? I need to go through a journey in which I learn a new perspective or a new skill. So with that, what is challenging myself mean? And it's usually the thing you go, I can't do, which I can't give somebody else the reins, or I can't ask for help. That's probably the things that you should be doing. And the thing that will challenge you will help you get to that next level.
Do you think that challenging yourself allows you and the business to be more malleable?
Yeah.
And to be willing to pivot? And how important do you think that is? Because there is, there are people out there, if they're running their own business, where it's like, I am the business, and it's like, hey, that Frank Sinatra song, I did it my way. And there's positives, right? Of like, I'm going to do it my way. But then it gets to a point where it's like, if you're so rigid and you're not malleable and you're not willing to pivot and you're not willing to see like what's working and what's not working, could be the downfall of your business. So how important is it to be malleable and to be willing to change and accept outside feedback?
Yeah. And I don't think anything that I'm saying or the way I interact or how I built a business is at all complex or overly difficult. To answer your question, it ties back to one of the first things that I said. If it's difficult, you're probably,
doing it wrong.
You're probably doing it wrong. And it all kind of ties back to that. And that's something that literally is on repeat in my brain when I hit a plateau or I hit a point in which I think, okay, I wanted to open the float center and by any means necessary, I want to open a float center. But guess what? If I would have stayed down that road, I wouldn't be here. And the skill sets that I learned and the capital that was generated and the people that I met and all of that, I wouldn't be here if I didn't allow myself the opportunity to challenge myself. So it's being malleable on your idea doesn't necessarily mean that you give up or that you, like, I don't know. I just don't believe like being rigid. Like if it's not working, it's not working, man. But it doesn't mean that you're a failure or that, it's not going to work. It's just maybe the way that you perceive it or the way you interact with it isn't working. Like it's as simple as that.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You got an award from, what was it, the New York Times?
Oh, yeah, we were, so this was, I believe, 2020. We were like the top
best
10 CBD brands,
bath brand or something like that?
Yeah, that was cool, man. Like, that was weird.
Was that like a moment where you're like, oh, this business is like this is, not saying it wasn't a thing before, but like, oh crap, like this is a thing. Like this is super serious.
Yeah.
Or did you have that feeling before?
Well, once again, like I kind of have my blinders on in the sense of like at the end of the day, I'm still trying to open a float center 5 years later. Like, yeah, I'm kind of taking the long way around, but the objective has always been that and to express myself and my brand as righteously as possible. With that being said, it was validating in a lot of ways as far as like, I feel very confident in what I offer is a good thing. I don't know if, it's been in enough people's hands, especially at that time, in order to get recognition like that. But the things that I put into the product and the recipes and the effort and all that, like it was humbling. It was really humbling, and it meant a lot. And since then, there's been a lot of big milestones. But like to be included with some brands that are not only much bigger, but I know have a lot more funding and a lot more people and a lot more brains attached to what it is that they're doing, in the sense of, this 20, 30, 40 people. And literally it's me, my sister, and my girlfriend, and them basically helping me build my dream. Like that was like, oh man, like I'm proud of that. What
do you think some of you're saying you're in the same room or being on the same list as other bigger brands with more employees? What do you think are, just from like a pro and con perspective, right? Because there's pros and cons to everything. What do you think some of the advantages of you being a smaller company versus a bigger company?
I can pivot easier. I can be more honest with the messaging, right? Like it's not a big company, so it's not like there's many filters that things need to go through. And, maybe there'll be a point in which, we're 20, 30, 40, 50, employees deep and multiple products and all that. But the objective of what the brand is so solidified in my mind. It allows us to play with what that is, because there's not so much mud and people attached that don't necessarily see the vision. Where I feel like even some of the bigger brands, it doesn't feel as passionate to me. And just from a consumer perspective, maybe my brand doesn't feel like that, or Unplugged doesn't feel like that yet. But I feel like innately people within the area who have interacted with me and the brand see that. And that's something that I don't think the bigger brands, that's as tangible.
Now, from that, you ended up doing a deal with Bespoke Post.
Yep.
Can you walk through that deal and who approached who and how that worked? And I want you to touch upon that first, and then I have a second part to that question.
Yeah, so it was, I believe, 2020. It was, I think, before that article, but they were looking for small businesses. I think it was right in the beginning of COVID, and they were looking to work with small businesses, potentially Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. And I, shot an email, and it was an application attached, and I just filled it out and didn't necessarily think a ton of it. I was like, hey, I'm just going to shoot my shot. And this was right around the time that we not gave up, but slowed down our social media content. So that allowed the space for me to invest time in that aspect of the business. And they got back to me, and they were like, oh, we like the brand looks. Can you send some samples? And we went back and forth. And it's been a really cool partnership.
Now, Yeah, I like to use the word partnership. Another word I would maybe use is collaboration, and that's the second part of my question. Is that can you explain what Bespoke Post is actually before I go into that second part? Just for the people that don't know what the heck it is. 'Cause it's not like your traditional store. It's not like just an online shop. It's a little bit of a different model.
Yeah, so they have it seems to be primarily mail driven, but it's a subscription box / online storefront, which you can kind of tailor it to your personal needs, whether it be to bespoke knives, camping gear, stuff like that, all the way to skincare, bath body stuff, obviously. And they do monthly subscription box services, as well as they have a storefront with a bunch of different products, and primarily focusing on craftsman-based products, smaller businesses. But even before I got with them and started to collaborate with them, I was impressed with like the level of quality of their product. So it was cool.
So I'm glad you said that as well, because that's two things I want to touch on in this second part of the question, which was, it's partnership, collaboration, because it's not just your traditional retailer where it's like, sell my thing. And I come from the world of collecting sneakers, and there was a time where it seemed like there was a collaboration every other week, and I'm like, does this collaboration actually, it's kind of happening now again? Does this collaboration make sense? So you had the partnership with them, you liked what they did, and you liked how they were doing things. So it wasn't just, it's like another place to sell. It's like, no, this makes sense. When it comes to partnerships and collaborations, how important is it that it makes sense for both parties, and how do you evaluate that? Like maybe let's say, I don't know, there was another Bespoke Post-like company, but maybe you didn't like the presentation or whatever, or maybe they're offering you like, hey, we're going to offer you more benefits or whatever or maybe more profit in the back. I don't know. Just from like, hey, they tried to maybe throw more money, but like, hey, I'm going to back out and not do it. How do you go about evaluating a partnership, and how is it right for your brand and things of that nature, especially if like the people that you're partnering with may have certain terms, or like, hey, we have the way we do things, you have the way you do things. So how do you make sure it works for both parties?
Yeah, I just approach it with an open mind and from the place of it. This is so personal to me, it's got to make sense. So either their mission has to be aligned with what my mission is, or offer something of value other than it being just a solely monetary thing. Like granted, if a business reached out and they wanted to buy 1 million soaks or something, like that might be a difficult decision. But for the most part, it's a matter of like what the brand stands for, what they're trying to achieve, and how does Unplugged match with those things. Like, does it feel right? Is that a good dancing partner? Is this something that I either I consume from, or is somebody that consumes our products? Like, does it make sense? Is it cohesive?
There's that old saying, be careful of the company you keep. And I think this quote is not just great life advice, but great business advice as well, especially when it comes to collaborations. Kevin collaborating with both JCPenney and Bespoke Post have done wonders for the growth of his business. But he didn't just say yes to those collaborations right away. Instead, he studied the terms of both partnerships, what each party's responsibility would be, how his products would be sold and displayed, and possibly, most important, how his brand would be represented. The lesson here, don't just collaborate with anybody. Make sure whomever you collaborate with elevates your brand and your business in the best way possible. Speaking of that, how do you handle scaling the business? Because I think scaling is something difficult. Like some businesses scale too fast, and then all of a sudden that's the downfall, right? So how do you handle scaling? And a specific example I have, and you talked about this in an email with me, is that I think you're already rolled out, if not, or if you're soon to be rolled out in 300 JCPenney stores.
Yeah, that's hopefully by the end of the year. Actually, when you came in, I don't know if you noticed the tons of pallets.
Yes, I did notice. I was like, I'm definitely going to ask about that.
Yeah.
So how do you handle scaling, and how did this opportunity with JCPenney come about? And was there, because again, like sometimes too much success too fast, you scale too quick, it might not be a good thing. So how are you like, oh, like, how did JC Penney come about? How did they pitch you the idea? What made you go, yeah? And then was there a moment of like, oh crap, we got to make enough to get into 300 JC Penney stores?
Yeah, definitely the last part. And I'm still kind of going through it as we expand some of our offering. But specifically for the JC Penney deal, once again, very similar, like COVID obviously was, kicking everybody's butt. We weren't posting as much on social media. I was doing a ton of research as far as what some of the businesses were doing and making pivots to, try to survive in such a crazy time. With all that being said, I ended up having an opportunity to work with a distribution channel that would allow Unplugged to be pitched to various retailers. One day, I get a phone call. The distribution channel reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Kevin."
Is that the store within the store thing that's going on at JCPenney?
Kind of.
So I heard
yeah.
there was like an online site that was the distribution channel, and then JCPenney was going to partner with them, and then that online site specifically works with smaller businesses. So it was their thing being a store within a store. Sorry.
Kind of. Yeah. No worries. Yeah, that's 13 Loon, which I believe they have.
I was trying to remember the name.
So that was 13 Loon. And then the company that I'm working with is called The Landing. And they're an international distribution channel. And
did you seek out The Landing or they seek you out?
No, dude, okay. It's no social media, man. Just
Gotcha. Okay, just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah. So they reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, JCPenney's interested. Would you be interested in rolling out?" And this is kind of how they're going to be rolling out. And they gave me all the numbers and the perspective. And I went, "Can I let you know?" And they were like, yeah, I'll give you a couple of days. It's a lot to digest. And I, asked, the people on my team and family members. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it fits with JCPenney. Like, I don't know if the brand and the objective is JCPenney.
A big mass retail, and then like, what if JCPenney has certain restrictions on how it's presented, or if they want you to make changes, which maybe they did, and you can probably maybe even walk through that a little bit, or maybe they didn't, and if so, great. But yeah, there's those questions too.
Yeah. So I was like going back and forth with it. So we end up scheduling another meeting with the distribution channel, and they give me the overall picture of what's happening with JCPenney and how they're spotlighting brands and they're curating the space. So I don't know if you're familiar, but Sephora has been in the JCPenney's for years, like the skincare beauty line. With that, JCPenney was curating all their own brands, and they were spotlighting Black-owned, minority, woman-owned businesses that look like the people that actually consume products at JCPenney. So the idea was, from their perspective, and I'm paraphrasing, and I hope I get this right, I don't want to misspeak, but essentially having brand owners to match their customers. So there's a connection there, and trying to do good not only for just their customers and offering unique products that don't necessarily get the opportunity to be exposed at that high level, but also help the customers find brands that are unique and would resonate with them more. And I was like, you know what, like, that's legit, man. Like, I understand that mission and the objective of Unplugged. It was to help underserviced people, like whether you think of type A, Cape Verdean, Black, male, in the space of like unplugging and having access to people on that type of scale. One is huge, but like the energy behind it felt righteous, right? Like it came off to me like they're really trying to not only help brands but help their consumers. So I was like, yeah, I'm about that life. Like, let's make it happen. And it's been a whirlwind since.
You have to deal with bespoke posts. You have to deal with JCPenney, scaling, still you and two other people. How do you run this, scale this, and just not lose your mind? Like, how do you have time to unplug? Like, you're dedicating a business to helping people unplug, but then how much of it does it in your time where like, oh, I have to unplug? Like, how do you keep your sanity and a social life, and how do you balance all that stuff out, especially when you have like a all-in type personality?
Yeah. So social life, that's out the window. That's number one. That's gone. So yeah, that one's out. I still work out a considerable amount. I have a few students that I do on the side that I do it because that's something that I enjoy. But the difference between, Kevin, 28, 29 years old, that's running a trucking company and fighting versus the Kevin now, is I love everything that I do, and I'm very conscious of like my effort and like what I'm capable of, as well as the little aspects of unplugging and getting massages consistently and like taking care of myself. So I feel like I put myself in a position of homeostasis where I might work a little bit harder for a month or so, but I know I've kind of like timed my rhythms, and in a very short amount of time, I definitely think we're going to have to expand, not only for our production, but expand our employees, which I very much look forward to. But right now, it's good. It feels good, and I think we're in a good spot.
And, speaking of these milestones, right, like it's a positive that it's a good problem to have that you have to grow. Again, the JCPenney milestone, the New York Times award, the bespoke post, right? These are all great things. The one thing is like sometimes people get addicted to success and they get addicted to the highs. And then all of a sudden, like when the highs aren't happening, then like the lows are really crushing. And then some people get too much into the lows, and then it gets to a point where like they don't even try to strive for the highs. How do you keep things balanced where you're not addicted to like the super highs, but then you're also like when there is a setback or a criticism, you're not feeding too much of it either? Like, how do you keep in balance?
Yeah, so I'm big into stoicism and like really trying to internally mitigate how I interact with extreme highs and extreme lows. Just to answer that simply, and then secondarily, for me, in looking at what I'm trying to achieve, I reframe in various aspects of my life. Like I reframe my reward structure in the sense of like, as much as getting the deal with JCPenney is super valuable, somebody coming up to me, and it could be a family member, somebody that's bought from me, whatever, and going like, that was an amazing experience. Those are equal on my success scales, because the driver, like,
It's your personal definition of success.
Exactly. Like the reward isn't only monetarily, right? Or the reward isn't only I got 1,000 likes, or like that dopamine release. Like you can get that in various aspects. So like if you mentally or try to retrain your brain in the sense of like, I know for me what's most impactful is having a one-on-one interaction with somebody that loves or is appreciative of what I offer, or get some value out of what I offer. And that could be somebody at JCPenney and me walking into the store and on that scale, or like me helping a student learn how to throw a better jab.
Now, going along with that, right, scaling, keeping things in balance, what is your process and how do you evaluate taking risk? And what I mean by that is, you're now going to start skincare, right? That's taking a risk because it's not the thing. It's not necessarily like it's still in the wheelhouse of like what you do with the company, but it's not the thing that brought you to the dance, right? You could just keep making different variations of the salts and then go on with that. But skincare, it's a new product, it's a risk. So how do you evaluate, risk and, when it comes to especially trying out new ideas? And on top of that, how do you get rid of the excuses? Like, hey, I don't have enough time or bandwidth to do this new skincare line. I don't have enough, there aren't going to be enough hours for me to do X, Y, and Z. So how do you evaluate risk, especially when it comes to new ideas, and how do you eliminate the excuses?
Yeah, so for me, financially, for the most part, I try to be mindful, obviously, of the capital, but I don't look at it as dollars and cents. I look at it as chips, like almost like I'm playing poker. So the risk is an assessment of what I have in my hands or what the potential rewards are. Once again, kind of like playing off of the idea of poker. So, okay, I have to invest X amount of money for X amount of potential reward, and what's the worst thing that can happen? If the worst thing that can happen is I just lose money, but I gain either a skill set or I could learn something of value, more often than not, I try it. And to me, I feel like I'm playing with house money because I didn't necessarily go to school for business and have a $200,000 loan. So if I lose 20 grand on trying to develop a new product, to me, I'm up. I'm still up because I got to learn in real time for $20,000. And I'm throwing numbers out there, but it's just that idea of, to mitigate the risk, like I want to gather as much information as possible. But at the end of the day, if the biggest risk is either ego driven, so like, oh, I'll feel stupid if this doesn't succeed, or financially driven, like, oh, I'm going to lose a lot of money, 9 times out of 10, I'm still going to try it.
With that being said, especially that perception of success and mitigating risk and whatnot, we were talking about this earlier before the show started. There's this perception today of, and I really want to get your opinion on this because you are a go, go, go type of guy and have this big go home or, go big or go home personality. There's this perception where it's like, oh, you want to be an entrepreneur? And again, not everybody's built for it, but you want to be an entrepreneur, then you got to be like The Rock or Mark Wahlberg. You got to get up at 4 a.m. You have to have all these crazy habits, and not everyone can or wants to do that. Flip side of it, we're in you hear, you see articles where it's like this person turned their side hustle into this, where they generate income, they quit their main thing. Do you think somebody can start or run a successful business in their spare time and have it be the side hustle and then maybe take over? Or does it have to be a go big or go home? Or can there be a happy medium? Can somebody just run a business that hey, it's not going to be the top in their industry, but if they're happy with that and their perception of success, it doesn't have to be. They can start it out. Again, that whole scaling with what you got. Maybe you don't have all the hours in the day and you don't have the time because maybe you have kids or maybe you have other responsibilities. Can it start off as just something small on the side and maybe it just grows into something where it just pays the bills and that's okay too?
Yeah, no, and it definitely can grow. I think probably the defining factor, at least in my opinion, of an entrepreneur that can kind of persevere is, and we just kind of touch upon it, reward structure, and then also that tenacity. But that's more of a mental thing, right? You don't have to work 20 hours a day every day. Could you potentially get successful and be like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos? And they achieve that by essentially doing that from, what we read.
And you could also get burnout too.
That was the very next thing that I was going to say. You could get burnt out, make a bad decision because you're tired and lose everything because, you weren't in a position to make the best educated decision. With all that being said, it really comes down to knowing yourself, right? In a way of really exploring, okay, what challenges me? What do I want to achieve? What rewards me? Is it just if I said, okay, I want to make $1 million. So I want to make $1 million. So I'm going to start a float center company that segues into a bath soap company. That's not necessarily the easiest way to make $1 million, man. So if making $1 million or if it's a dollar amount that you're looking for as an entrepreneur and that being your first venture, I don't think that's the right perspective to have to be successful. I think and once again, coming from personal experience, the idea was I love this thing and I want to offer this thing to as many people as possible. So what rewards me is having the opportunity to offer it to as many people as possible, not the dollar amount. So with that, it's allowed me to persevere for longer probably than most people because I don't have $1 million yet, but I have a good amount of people that like what I do and some accolades that kind of stoke that fire to continue on. And that's all you can ask for, right? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So how do you facilitate that? By kind of restructuring your reward structure.
Yeah, because a win could be hey, the business is self-sustaining. Maybe I have to do things myself to do my income, but the business is self-sustaining.
Yeah.
It's either breaking even or breaking a profit. And then okay, from there, okay, now it's breaking a profit. Oh, now it's paying for me and my lifestyle. It's paying the employees. Okay, from there, it's how do you define success?
Yeah, but not even on that scale. It's funny. I was just having this conversation, right? In I don't know if you've ever kind of like made something from, yeah, I'm sure you have, right? So how amazing it is to have an idea, to make something, and not only somebody buy it, but somebody go, that's awesome.
Yeah, I like that thing you
That is the best feel.
And they spend money on it, and then they tell somebody else, and you're just like, holy shit.
That's, to me, there's nothing better than that, period. So, okay, $1 million, whatever, but like that moment, and whether you're telling a joke, whatever your thing is, like, to me, like, if you can build your business, quote unquote, business around that, like, as long as what you make is good, or you work harder to make your thing good, like, that's it. That's as good as it gets.
So I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. We were talking about perceptions and things earlier. what are some perceptions about, the industry that you're in, or the industries, or the types of industries that you're in, or what you do that you feel either incorrect or just not accurate, that you wish people either knew the right information, or you just people knew what was really going on?
Oh man, there's a lot of industries and a lot. I have an interesting perspective on a lot of things, a lot of businesses, and
It can be one thing, a couple of things.
yeah, I'm trying to distill it down. I think I can distill it down. So I think, and like I hate to ring the bell again in the sense of like reward structures, but like the perception of keeping up with the Joneses, or getting X amount of likes or X amount of followers or making X amount of money. Like at the end of the day, to me, and success is defined by what satiates you. And with that being said, looking at the industry of CBD or floating or skincare and how I'm trying to grow my business, I feel content, not necessarily where we are, but where I am and where the business is, based upon the journey and based upon the righteousness of the pursuit. And what I mean by that is like I'm rewarded because, or I get rewarded every day because I show up and I put my heart and soul into my business, and it might not be where I want it to be or at its end state, but like I'm rewarded by the labor of the love of the thing. And I think that's allowed the business to persevere and be a superpower and help the growth and stoke the fire for us to continue on. Where the misconceptions and I think where people get things wrong is, that first tier of reward structure, and like, okay, like either your business needs to make X or I'm selling a product in which these are the benefits. Like that, all of that stuff comes from like this disingenuous place, and from this place of like, you're trying to achieve this thing and you're trying to achieve this thing by any means necessary. So I'm going to tell you it's going to solve this problem, or I'm going to tell you that I can make this thing better or whatever. And I think that it easily can be resolved in the misconception is being yourself and just showing up does majority of the work in anything. So that's a super roundabout, but still kind of distilled down answer,
Random question, because I've heard your podcast.
Yeah.
What's the deal with you and breakfast?
Oh, dude, yeah.
Seriously, I'm curious.
It's not just breakfast. It's not just breakfast.
Is like a metaphor thing? You just really like breakfast? I was dying to ask that. I was like, let me ask that at the end.
Yeah.
I don't want to have anything to do with anything. But.
Yeah. Oh, dude, yeah, I can go on a tangent. So the breakfast thing isn't just breakfast. It's more of a metaphor, but in the beginning of the podcast, and I'll kind of in that particular podcast, but the idea is playing with.
It seems like a driving life thing, so yeah, that's why I wanted to ask it.
Yeah, so in the beginning of that podcast, and I got to do more, and it's driving me nuts that I'm not podcasting more. But with that being said, at the beginning of the podcast, I started with a quote of how you do anything is how you do everything. So personally, I make a breakfast in a very regimented manner, and it's evolved over time, and I played with ingredients in different pans and different temperatures, and I found a breakfast that not only satiates me, but that I enjoy on a consistent basis. And it costs, I just went all in on this thing, and that was I use that as a metaphor of like, if you've listened to this conversation, obviously that's the way I would approach. I would approach my breakfast, right? And the idea in the podcast was like leveraging your skill sets, right, based upon what you do, right? So like how you do anything is how you do everything. What are you good at? What are you most successful, or feel most rewarded, and how do you achieve that thing? So. And just visiting that. And it gets kind of like meta and metaphorical, but yeah, that was the idea. So yes, I do make an awesome.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a maniac, but yeah, I think it's valuable.
Speaking of valuable, what advice would you give maybe to your younger self or to other entrepreneurs out there, whatever age they may be, that are either trying to start a business or have an idea, or they want to put something out into the world? Just from your experience and your travels and what you've done in building this, what advice would you give?
Oh man, yeah, just show up, man. Just show up and allow yourself to experience the journey, right? Like, and by no means do I want to be cliche, but like, that is the most valuable thing of just going, like, at the end of the day, knowing what you're trying to achieve as a person, right? Like, not necessarily in your business or what your business or service or something like that, but just really going, like, what rewards me and what is the mark that I want to leave, and just show up and just show up every day, you know?
So with that, we're at the end, and on every show, I always end it the same way. It's open mic, live mic, no questions, just promote or talk about or say whatever you want to close out. No, not even a time limit, just whatever you want to close out on. Floor is yours. Go for it.
Oh, all right. Well, so thank you for listening to me, number one. Number two, you can find Unplugged Essentials at JCPenney online and in 10 stores. We'll be rolling out to 300 stores nationally. BespokePost.com, JCP.com, UnpluggedEssentials.com. And if you enjoyed this, please shoot me an email. I'd love to hear some feedback. Kevin at UnpluggedEssentials.com. And yeah, keep an eye out for the podcast. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, and thank you, Kevin, for coming on. And yeah, until next time, everybody, keep on creating. And that's it for this episode of The Creative Capital Show. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks goes to this episode's guest, Kevin M. Rose Jr. The Creative Capital Show is hosted, recorded, edited, mixed, and produced by me, Jason Sylvia. You can listen to The Creative Capital Show over at our website, creativecapitalshow.com. We're also available on Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe. Helps the show out a lot. And be sure to follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show, and until next time, keep on creating.